Okay, everyone, so we can see now that the Facebook Live is streaming this video from Zoom. So we're going to begin the event. I'm going to move out of the way, make sure that you can see everybody here in the panel. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so welcome to everybody that's watching this event live, and for everybody that's going to watch this event after the fact as well. We're going to keep this video on the Interfaith Encounter Association Facebook page, and we'll also be uploading a version to YouTube as well. So today we're having the meeting at Magdala, and in essence, what this is an ecumenical panel that we've brought together, which represent different Christian communities in the Holy Land. And each person here would be a leader of the Christian community in their own right. And we're here today to talk about the role of interfaith relations in the Holy Land, but as a general concept as a whole. So we've had a wonderful few hours together. We've already sat and ate dinner together. We had a wonderful mass led by Father Kelly together, and we've been enjoying amazing hospitality at Magdala. And I'll let our physical host give us also a quick introduction as well.
I'm very happy to welcome everybody here, and it gives me great joy because some of these relationships go back a long time. The newest one is probably Pastor Sally, although we met also years ago at the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, and Taig, who is leading this effort here for the IAA this evening, is probably one of the newest people here for me. But I want to also recognize, even though he's not going to come before the camera, you know, sometimes King Charles stays off screen. But here we have Yehuda Stolov, and I must say that I'm in love with the Interfaith Encounter Association since I first learned about it many years ago. I'm 17 years here, and neither Yehuda or I could remember when we first met, but it was probably at Notre Dame of Jerusalem. And so it was astonishing to learn that this organization that brings Jews, Muslims, and Christians together in small community groups from different areas and different sectors of life, how they came to birth at a time of incredible difficulty in the Second Intifada. And so this is an extraordinary thing that also since October the 7th, new groups have formed. And I would say that our audience is primarily overseas. Maybe there are some people in Israel participating here also and in Palestine. But I would say that we have, there's a big message here for the Western world, especially. And the Western world culturally, let's say, has a lot of Christian basis to it. Maybe it's secularized in a great degree. But I would say that the Western world is oversaturated with news of difficulties that are here in the Holy Land, and the only thing you hear is hostilities and aggression. And this is not the complete reality at all. Welcome to Magdala.
Wonderful. So with that being said, we're going to get straight into the discussion aspect of the meeting here today. And in order to open this up, very rightly, as Father Kelly just mentioned, many people, even in the Holy Land, don't necessarily appreciate the rich fabric of interfaith relations that there are in many places here. So the first question, which I'd like to ask each of you in turn, I suppose from left to right from where I'm sitting, is this. As Christian community leaders here in the Holy Land, how integral to your lives are interfaith relations? Are they an aspect of your day-to-day reality, or rather are they encounters that you have to seek out and pursue in order to engage in?
Thank you. Greetings. I'm Fadi Ramadan from Nazareth, and in the ministry that I'm involved in, this is, I can say, a daily aspect of my life, because reaching out to the children in the villages we go to, the different cities in the country, I face all different religions, and we talk together. We have good communication. They invite us to do programs to their children. and this is something that I'm facing every day. So it's part of my, I can say it's part of my daily routine. And I'm so happy for that. So glad that we can even have the children start seeing this from a small age, young age, and they can grow up in this mentality.
I mean, growing up in Jerusalem, I've been only encountered with the Muslim religion, but then also I was in a Catholic school, the Schmidt Girls College. So I've learned also a lot about the other religions, or it was also that me as a Lutheran, I was the only Lutheran in my class until like high school. There was another girl that joined, but it was also always a discussion how we Lutherans are always different, and everyone else was Catholic or Orthodox. And so that was mainly the discussions, what we say in church and what the others say in church. And then I was quite like brought up with knowing that we all have differences, yet we all came together to school and prayed once a week together. And now being a pastor, it's also has become more and more intense, or more actually like that I'm more encountered with it, let's say. So, and even in the week of prayer that we come together as ecumenical churches and so on, there has been not a lot of encounter with the Jewish religion, sadly, even growing up. And now I'm like throughout my theological studies, I learned more about it. And I started even now like meeting more rabbinesses and so on, and now learning even about how it is in Jerusalem. Yet I feel like it's not enough. And I feel like in my daily life, it sometimes does not come across it, because with the church work that I have, it's not there. But it's also, I feel like as a woman pastor, it's also quite different, because I think a lot of our churches, or the different churches that we have, don't support women ordination, and that makes it difficult in order to know how to, or how what is kind of, to what extent we can come together in that sense. I think everyone's still figuring that out.
So I would say that, first of all, Fadi took my words, because I actually wrote down textually here. Sally can vouch for this, Pastor Sally. Day-to-day reality. I have a different role than both Fadi and Sally, in that I'm technically not leading a community of Christians here, of Catholics, because that's not my mission. The mission of our community in the Holy Land, both at Notre Dame of Jerusalem and here in Magdala, is serving the pilgrimage primarily. But serving the pilgrimage means, from the very beginning, working with Muslims and Jewish people. So for 17 years, I've been working with Muslims and Jewish people. And actually, Notre Dame is a haven for interfaith encounter. It's a daily reality, an hourly reality. In one day, just here in Magdala, our staff comprises, obviously, Muslims, Jews, Christians, and we have Druze, and that's a different religious segment. And then a different faith group, also monotheist. And then we have, just ethnically, we have also Bedouins working with us, Arabs, Israelis, and the Israelis might be from North Africa or from Yemen originally, or they might be from Europe or from America. And then the Christians, I remember one of the first guides I worked with was a Finnish woman who was also Lutheran, and her husband was Armenian Catholic Christian, and he was also a guide. And, you know, it's every day like this. So it's a very different reality when I used to call our receptionist at Notre Dame, his name was Walid, which means a little baby, you know. And I would call him our favorite Imam at Notre Dame. He used to laugh abundantly over this. He was our longest-standing employee there, together with Yusuf Barakat. And so there are friendships that build over 17 years. And you know about their birthdays, you know about their children's births, you know about their funerals. They often had them celebrated at Notre Dame, there's so much that you have contact every day. The Shabbat, so many different realities. It's really amazing. And I can't imagine my life without this rich encounter now every day across the board.
No, and I can just say, as a small add-on to what each of you said as well, is that many people that are watching this may be from Western Europe or from North America. there's very different connotations when it comes to having intergroup relations. You know, people might think that there might need to be a more homogenous or more segregated or more differentiated. It's hard for people to necessarily see that there is a reality whereby you can be in a room of 5 different people with different faiths, different identities, different heritages, different languages, but you can communicate as though you're all one.
I would like to say one other line about Philippians. And I think this would apply very much then in the West, because maybe most people in the West won't have a multi-religious environment in which they're working. When I was raised in Ireland, the west of Ireland, in a farm, everybody was Catholic. And there were very few that weren't Catholic that we ever met. The guy who used to deliver calor gas, because we didn't have electricity, he was a Presbyterian. My dad would say, God bless the poor man. But it was said with great love. It was said with great respect and devotion. So I want to say another thing that I always try, and I think that's necessary for us in the West, to reach out, because that was the second part of your question. And I think we need to seek the encounter with the other. And I personally feel that, and I'm kind of compelled interiorly, wherever I see somebody that's separated from me culturally and religiously, I want to make contact. I want to make a human contact and to build a bridge so that the separation and sometimes very bad memories from the past don't burden our life together today.
That was a very good note. So rather than going in turn now, we're just sort of going to open this up, right? I'm sure that you can all be civil in figuring out who's going to say what when. But I'm just going to open the floor to all of you, and this would be the essence of the question, okay? First of all, based off of a personal life experience, it could be anything from childhood to today, right? Any experience that you've had which you draw upon as like a core memory of interfaith relations learning, which you can take forward and either tell other people about to help teach them the moral of your story, or that you use personally to remind yourself or to inspire yourself to go forward. So it could be, well, I'm open to hear whatever that it might be for you. Who can think of a core memory like that?
I would start with how I encountered or how I started envisioning the 3 religions at least, and because that's what we live with in Jerusalem. So in my high school, when I was doing my Abitur, like my last year of studies, and that year you get to read a book which is Nathan the Wise, and that was really something that I think now some people will be like, oh, it's a cliche or something, but for me personally, it was quite effective. That I loved reading the book. Like maybe I read it twice, and I was like, okay, that's such an amazing story, or how it's kind of encountered with all the 3 religions kind of coming together. Like it's all about the end coming together to having like one ring being divided into 3, and you don't know which one is the right one because the father kind of separated it into 3 rings so that they're all kind of equal in that sense. And this is the same way I look at all the religions that we have, that they're all equal. We all have our personal relationship with God and the way we talk to God. And that's also one inspiration, how to explain the religions that we have in this world. So in that sense, this is one story that affects me.
So it was a piece of literature, and what was the name of it again?
Nathan the Wise.
Nathan the Wise, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah. Actually, when you asked the question and you mentioned childhood, what came back to my mind is my father. My father is the one who really affected me into this kind of thinking of interfaith. He was a pastor in the village where we grew up, in one of the villages in Galilee, and it's his lifestyle. He was this person who is friends with everyone and wants to bring everyone together. And he was involved actually in meetings of ecumenical meetings. And as you all know, it is not something that's accepted by everyone. So there was opposition But I still remember him clearly, and how he used to go and to these meetings, encourage these meetings, even invite to our church, to the church where he was pastoring. So I grew up being affected in a positive way from my father, having this interfaith passion.
I will just share a couple of experiences from Jerusalem. I could go back to my dad as well, but I really didn't get out of a Catholic milieu really until I came here actually once. The first one was at Northern Kentucky University, where I was a chaplain, and the head chaplain, because of the years of tenure there of experience, was a Baptist. So our ministry was being organized under Baptist leadership. That was a new one. But also when I was in Germany working in youth work, I was there for 11 years. And we had a retreat once that was organized by a couple of Catholic kids in the mountains near Salzburg, completely snow covered. We had to walk through a meter of snow to get to this hut. And it turned out that half the kids were Lutheran, evangelisch. And so I had to adjust my mind to address the retreat and to adapt to it. That was a learning experience. But I want to share with you a couple of little things from here and from Jerusalem. I found it stunning on the Via Dolorosa, the Way of the Cross, between the 3rd station and the 5th station on Friday afternoons. And there you have, like the Mississippi River, such an intense current of flow of thousands of Muslims going from the Damascus Gate to the Temple Mount. But among them, you have all these ultra-Orthodox Jews with their headgear and their black robes, and they're going through that same space at that point on the way to the Western Wall. And there we going, groups of Christians carrying a wooden cross, praying at the 3rd station, the 4th station, and the 5th station, Simon of Cyrene. And then we turn off the road, the Way of the Cross goes then in a different direction towards the Holy Sepulchre. But for those 3 stations, it's only about 80 yards long, maybe less, 70 or 80 yards, meters. And in that space, you have all 3 religions going for reasons of devotion together in the same space. I think that's a very powerful icon of the experience in Jerusalem, but also in the Holy Land. And then I want to share 2 other little things that have stunned me. And one is cultural, and that is when an Arab family have their first child, the name of the parents change.
Yes.
And now you know this, everybody in the West, because on the TV and on the newspapers, sometimes you will read the name of a man called Abu Mazen, but you will also see that his same man is called Mahmoud Abbas. So he's the father of Mazen, Abu Mazen. So what stunned me, and the mother then is Mazen. So this means that the society has such a treasure set on the contribution a couple give to society that their name changes when they have their first child. And it just stunned me. And also another expression of that is in the mourning. When somebody dies, at 7 days of mourning, they drop everything, and everybody that knows them comes by and spends time with them in their mourning. An extraordinary experience of family life, which I also had at the Shabbat dinners with Jewish families, the way they treat the children during Shabbat, the way the husband treats the wife, such family life. And then the final word is the Shabbat experience. Jerusalem closes down on Shabbat. The trains don't run. The buses don't run. There's very little traffic. It's a great day to go out in the city. It's something we've lost Sunday in the West. We don't understand to have a day off, that you don't rush to do games and sports and driving, and the poor parents are driving 5 children in 15 different directions for all kinds of games on those days. They stop. They don't even cook, you know? It's amazing. It's a family day.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think one of the things that many people who visit Jerusalem only briefly for a day or 2 experience is complete overwhelmment to the point where they can't differentiate or understand what they're looking at. The number of times I've spoken with tourists who said, this isn't what I was expecting, this isn't what I was thinking, because you could not conceptualize the type of society that exists in Jerusalem until you are here, and then it takes you however many years until you even begin to figure out the nuances of it. So it's, I think for all of us, we have different searing memories that show us the examples of that. So on the second part then, and this is going into a little bit more on the looking out from just our own personal experiences, but using them also to guide us. Obviously, an age-old struggle of mankind has been, continues to be, hesitation, resistance, and opposition to positive interfaith relations. We already talked just about ecumenical, let alone even interfaith on its own. So,
explain those two terms, because sometimes there's a very confused usage of those two terms. Just very briefly, I noticed a big here we're having an ecumenical meeting, and sometimes that's misused for interfaith. So if we want to be technical and purist in the language, just so we understand the value of the expressions, ecumenical means the relationships between different Christian confessions of faith, whereas interfaith refers to the relationships with all different kinds of faith, even with Buddhist and Hindu, which isn't so much the case here. But here it's then between Muslim, Druze, Christian, Jewish, Baha'i, and so on.
and yeah, I mean, when it comes to the reasons why there is hesitancy and why there is opposition, we can go into like a whole anthropological conversation. But what I'm looking for here in the question to be answered is that as a Christian community leader in the Holy Land, proximal to what you can do around you, how do you approach overcoming the barriers to positive interfaith and I suppose also to some extent ecumenical relations in terms of helping individuals and helping communities of yours and also of the others as well? I mean, what do you do proactively that tries to help build that bridge, or what could you be doing?
The first thing that comes to mind usually as human beings is to argue. But as I found out, argument will not lead to anywhere. So how I go about doing this is participation. And I've seen this being very helpful, participating with them in their activities. If I expect them to participate with me, how can I invite someone to come to, let's say, to my church, if I'm not willing to go with him to his community or activity or whatever is happening and he's inviting me to? So I'm trying to participate. For example, there's a Bible contest that happens in Nazareth. It belongs to the Annunciation Church in Nazareth, which is the Latin church. And being an evangelical, participating in such a contest is something special for it's a blessing for both sides. And I want to try and encourage others to come. This is something very rich that is happening, and we all need to be part of it. And if we're not, we're missing out. The same, there's a small choir that I'm involved with, and it is from different denominations. And we are presenting, for example, next week, there's going to be an ecumenical meeting in the Nazareth Hospital. And they have invited us to share, a few songs in that meeting. So that's the idea of being not arguing in this matter, because there will always be opposition. It's actually going there, participating, and being part of it.
So I think what Fadi said is wonderful, because first of all, we're human beings. Mm-hmm. This is maybe a little bit theoretical. The point I would start out with is from our faith, which obviously we received from our older brothers and sisters, from the first witnesses of the one true and living God, is that we're made in the image and likeness of God. And so one good question to ask ourselves is, who doesn't qualify? Who does not qualify as made in the image and likeness of God? And I would even advocate, I do this a lot with a lot of different people, especially with priests and bishops, Catholics, and I say to them, maybe this has to become, in a certain sense, the most core truth of our faith that we develop and proclaim. And if we were able to learn to deal with each other as image and likeness of the Almighty, then from a Christian point of view, I think 3/4 of Jesus' work would be done. In terms of a redeemed world, obviously there's the whole question of the personal redemption, the relationship, the sin forgiveness, and all of that. But in terms of society, if we could treat each other within families, within communities, neighborhoods, and so on, I think this would be an extraordinary accomplishment. And for me, my work brings me in contact immediately with other people. And the first thing is just to be nice. And if I have hostility to somebody, well, this is a Muslim driver, this is a Jewish guide, or I don't think the pilgrims realize when they come here, their food is prepared by all these different people. They can be in a bus where the guide is Muslim or Christian or Jewish, and another faith is driving the bus. And it's amazing just to wake up, to the reality. I had a very difficult experience 3 days ago. A group of young Europeans.
Okay, so sorry everybody if there was a missing minute or two here. We just had a little bit of an outage of the internet. We're picking up exactly where we left off. Okay, so that was good. Didn't cut everything out and we had to start section 2. So what we've just been talking about, for those that are catching up over the last couple of minutes, is about what we are able to do to overcome the barriers that are presented by people's resistance to interfaith relations. And what we heard was, first of all, simply being a participant, being proactive and seeking out opportunities to be able to actually make that encounter. And that is based on a foundation, as was very well put by Father Kelly, that you must have the precondition of looking at every other person as the divine image and logos of God itself. And that obviously helps to steer you in the right direction in the encounter. You come positively with good, friendly intentions and goodwill, not with presuppositions and naive judgments about another person's character based on things that to do with identity.
I'd drive one more point on top of that.
Drive away.
There are 3 points here. So we were just mentioning how the foundation for our relationships is that we're created in the image and likeness of God. And we should be, I think, pretty strong about this principle and pushing it to a point, even though Fadi talked about not being argumentative, which I agree with completely, but I think there are some things we can make a case when people are resisting, especially people of our own Christian background. Many times they have also very strong reasons to resist. I can understand them. Maybe there's experience of violence in the community. Maybe there's a great fear. And that's why we need strong foundations. And what's a stronger foundation than that every human being is made in the image and likeness of God? Mm-hmm. And he's my brother and sister. And I have no idea what the mystery of God is in that person's life. I have no idea. It's a mystery of God. And then the second part of this is I was mentioning we were with a group of young volunteers from Europe working here in the Holy Land, and I had an occasion to meet with them a couple of days ago. And first of all, they kind of define themselves more secular Christians. There could be a whole spectrum there in this 8 or 10 young people. And they were very resistant to the encounter with the others. They have become despondent. And so the question was, I asked them, what society are you going to bequeath to your children and your grandchildren? Jump 60 years forward, you're going to be 80 years old. What society will your grandchildren inherit from you and what you do today as a 20-year-old? You're living here in the Holy Land, and in your country, there's a ghettoization. And it's like it's become almost impossible to make contact with the other that's very other. And I think we should talk really about this, because maybe this conversation we're having in the Holy Land, we're almost like in a startup lab of human living together. And this is where the whole world is headed because of transport. It's so easy to travel all over the world because of migration. There's huge movements of people like happened many times throughout history. So we're going to be living, our next door neighbors are going to be very different from us. My whole parish, 11 miles by about 6 miles across, there wasn't one family that wasn't Catholic. So, and they all went to church every Sunday. So what are we going to do to create connections? And we have to look for it. I think we have to become brave. We have to become decided to want, and maybe we won't find the answer. Maybe we'll be rebuffed, but we have to have a will to find the other. And actually, maybe that's also necessary here now. And that's why the organization you founded, Yehuda, is so important, because we have to have signs of life. We can't have death to encounter. We can't have the death of the relationships between us. I have to be able to meet and sit down with a Jew. I have to be able to speak with a Muslim. They're our employees. We work together serving the same pilgrims, guides, agencies that are owned Jewish or owned Muslims or owned by Christians, and we're all serving the same people. So our world will function like this. We absolutely need this. I'm just making an appeal really in that sense that we need to address our lethargy, our inertia, our sleepiness in this area. And this is current. This is not a theoretical conversation that's over there in Jerusalem, in the Holy Land, in Galilee. This is in every major town of the entire world today.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, because it is very important to, in general, just come together. And I just remembered, I just remembered the question that once someone asked me in German, like, how do you do it? How can you live together in that sense? And I said, I don't know, but no, really, I don't know, but we just do it because we grew up together in that sense. We don't look at the other the way everyone else looks at the other. Like, we look at each other and we know we're brothers and sisters living together. Okay, we have different faiths, but that's it. And I don't know, in school you get used to, like, I was the only Christian in my class, at least, and I never felt like, oh, I'm so different. I'm Lutheran. So yeah, it was always like I never felt a difference in that sense, because we all like lived the way we all live together. And in that sense, of course there are difficulties, yet this is what I feel like it's also now in the churches and so on. Why is it so difficult to bring people together in that sense? Because bringing people together is not the problem here. It's the problem where it gets to when we start talking about intensive things, like why would we even put ourselves into this position where we know we're not agreeing on things? But the most important thing is actually just to listen to each other. We don't have to agree. And so the best thing is about agreeing on not agreeing, yet just seeing one another and listening to each other, because these two aspects are, for me at least, very important to interfaith encounters.
No, and there was something that you said earlier about the three rings, each one being equal, but in its own way, only worn by one person. And maybe a hatch that was high on. This is what you said. One of the interesting learning experiences I had of I wouldn't necessarily define it as a particular culture, but it's a Middle Eastern thing, is the quietness and the slow cadence and not needing to speak for the sake of speaking, which feels awkward for a European to sit in a room with someone silently with no conversation. You feel that things are going badly, but in that person's respective culture, so fine. When you have something to say, I'm here to listen, but don't in the meantime just fill time by saying words. So yeah, like being in a really cooperative and positive interfaith or intergroup environment doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going out the Friday night and getting slashed. It can just be this mutual respect of culture, mutual respect of operating. So in this point then, and this is adding on to the other questions or sort of leading up a little bit, in your view, for any one of you and all of you, is it principally the role of the religious institute or the individual to be the one that calls for and promotes the development of positive interfaith relations? You could relate that to the religious institute of the church or any other faith that you think would be relevant to mention. Not the easy one to take the first pick.
I'm tempted to say both, if it's okay to say that. You know, it is the leader that affects the people. That's from what I saw also from my experience. So it is both my role as a leader in being this way and thinking of this interfaith relations that will be building towards, you know, we are trying to come together for a reason. There is hope. That's what we are coming to, if we're going to talk at all. As you said, sometimes it's just being there, being silent, being a friend. In the neighborhood I live in Nazareth, I'm living in a Muslim neighborhood. I'm the only Christian house there. And just living there without having to say anything, to speak anything, just the way you behave, the way you speak, the way you friend everyone, love everyone, they see it. They can see this. So there is this coming together for a reason, that there is hope in our faith in God. And so not only the leader, this will affect the people I am leading. If they are children or adults, they will look at me and imitate me. And hopefully I am imitating Christ. So that's how it should go. So giving the good example. So it is both the leader and the people as individuals. They need to have this as well.
I was also gonna say both, but at the same time, it's not only about being both, but it's about if a person cannot have it, like how can it be represented in an organization or anything like that? Because it's not about only saying that or being the vision or in that sense, okay, we want to have that, but it's about also believing that it is gonna happen. And if you don't believe in it, how can you be able to practice it? And I think it's always about what you're mostly convinced of in order to actually think of, okay, no, we're like, it's supposed to be part of it and it's supposed to be naturally. And I think they kind of correlate to each other. We cannot take one thing or separate the person from an organization, but we should look at both in the same way.
I agree with all of these statements. I would just like to give concrete experience in this area. And one piece was a little post I got from a friend in Milan the other evening. And I think it's a step that we need for us as Catholics. And I think this has significance for the whole Christian world, because somebody like Pope Francis is a figure that stands up and the attention is given in the media. So I think maybe people heard the soundbite but didn't hear more from it, that he met with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, who is one of the most respected imams in the world. And they had this extraordinary encounter, a number of encounters, and the imam also went to Rome, and then they had this declaration on fraternity. And this is actually becoming institutionalized. And I would say that most Catholics, maybe most priests, maybe even most bishops haven't read the document. And after this, there were many other follow-up documents with yearly messages for the Day of Human Fraternity. So that's at the level of top institutional leadership that opens up the doors for others to do it. So then yesterday, this priest from Milan sent me a picture of, you could see the guy was wearing a skull cap, kippah. He was a rabbi. There was a Muslim dressed person, and the cardinal or the Archbishop of Milan were in a meeting with a whole group of leadership in Milan, of people in the civic community and the religious organizations, and they were addressing this together. And the day before, I had this meeting with the young people who see no future for relationships with the Muslim community in their country. They just have fear, and they sense hostility, they sense threat, and they sense helplessness. But here we have the next level down from the Pope institutionally at the diocesan level in Milan, promoting this together with the Jewish and Muslim leadership. And I think that's what we need, but it needs to come down to the next level, to the local community, to the neighborhood. And then in that sense, it becomes an interest for everybody. If we do not talk to the other, we will end up demonizing the other. And once you demonize the other, that's the precondition for war and conflict. And when you discover the dignity of the human being in the other, the divine image in the other, then you have every reason not to go to war. You have every reason to find another solution. And obviously there are situations of incredible violence, and there has to be some stanching of the hemorrhage. But at some point, the absolute will of the people has to be, we cannot kill each other. We have to find a way to meet each other. And that's why this very existence of the Interfaith Encounter Association, IEA, for me, always was such a message that out of the Intifada environment it was founded. And after October the 7th, so many new groups have started. And young people, when I heard that piece of news, it gave delight to my heart because, okay, a lot of the Jewish people who are staying with us here in these circumstances right now are the grandparent generation, and they're people who advocated this type of encounter. And it's harder for another generation to accept it after atrocities happen. And then so many other waves of consequence follow, and how to emerge from a situation. And hopefully Europe and United States, North America, and the Western world in general can find avenues now while there's still time, before the environment becomes so poisoned that it will be impossible or very difficult to speak with each other. And this is an urgent need of humanity. And so we need the top institutional level. They need to become activated, especially in population areas where there's a great multiplicity of sometimes antagonistic lifestyles and worldviews. So we have a big mission in front of us. And courage and thanks to IEA. And the IEA can get established in your countries. It's a type of organization that's very simple, and you can get a group going. I encourage you to think about that as well and go to their website in that regard.
Wonderful. I mean, I think, and not to oversimplify what is in the back of some people's minds, but many that aren't necessarily that engaged in religion or faith have this idea that if, you know, the Pope, the top imam, like 5-6 people got together in a room and shook hands, you'd solve world peace. And on the inverse, though, on the reality of it, you do see certain nations or groups or areas where there is a principal leader who has a leadership role of a religious type, and there is belligerency and there is issues. So it's not that that silly picture is not necessarily untrue to some extent, but as you all said, it needs to coexist at the top and bottom level together. And the institution is nothing but a collection of individuals. So that works its way up. So a question now, this one was actually sent to us. We get lots of questions at the Interfaith Encounter Association from people across the world. I won't identify the person specifically because they didn't say they did or didn't, so I'll just say the question as it is. It was a lady from the United States of America, sent in a question, was basically one short sentence. What were interfaith relations like in the lifetime of Jesus? Sounds so simple that it's almost silly, but it's a very fair question. It's a very poignant question. And to the conversation that we're having today on the shore of the Galilee, it's not a question that I don't think is unfitting for the conversation here. So does any of you have a perspective on what you think interfaith relations were like?
There are abundant cases of Jesus encountering not just people of other faiths, but also people of not faith or very secular people like Pilate, like the centurion in Capernaum, doing miracles for them. And then another faith, I'm sure the Syrophoenician lady was most likely not an atheist or an agnostic. She had her own religious belief as a Syrophoenician. And Jesus said, I haven't found such faith in Israel. And he used the parable of the Naaman, the Syrian, who came for a miracle from Elisha, and Elisha didn't cure anybody else. So I think Jesus was using, if let's say you want to tell, let's take the case now of, we have some Jewish people here. So this rabbi is talking to these Jewish people, and he said, there was a great example of charity. Really, we can see it in one of the guys who lives in Iran or in Gaza or in Lebanon, and he's a part of the Hezbollah, So to be able to put up an example of the Good Samaritan as who is my neighbor, I think there's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say that Jesus started practically the interfaith. Just because, I mean, with all the things that you've mentioned as well. And he did the impossible of the things that people would have never even thought of, but maybe even wanted to do, but never dared to. So finally someone did it in order to sit with the other and talk to them. And that was the one thing that opened the ways that, oh, it's allowed to actually talk to each other. And I think this opened many doors to actually having more encounters, having people more welcome to join each other, learning more about the other than just living in different parts and not really, or not only fighting each other, kind of in that sense.
I want to also add to this, I want to go back to children because what comes to my mind, those the children that come to one of the activities we do in Nazareth are from both Christian and non-Christian background. And as children, they don't have these differences. They think simply, they think humbly. I would think the Lord Jesus had this same mindset of humbleness and humility. I mean, he loved the children, it says in the gospel. So with that kind of mentality, I'm sure he would be one of the first people with interfaith vision.
I mean, we can look at the Odyssey of Paul and Barnabas and say that they were, the voyagers of interfaith relations as a life goal they took upon after that, as was with many of the early church founders. Now, just because we're coming up to the cusp of an hour, there were a few minutes cut in and out, but we're rounding about to an hour. For this last part, I left it to each of you to think of a particular material. It could be a parable, a reading of scripture, a short story, personal anecdote, anything that you might be able to, tell to the audience that's watching here, which can help teach us something about the weight or the comprehension of the virtue of interfaith relations. Something you think is a poignant ending note to say. Should we go in around?
Maybe that's easier. Yes. Thank you. The word that comes to my mind is prayer. Prayer, there's power in prayer. And I believe if God allowed walls to be put down and bring two groups together, I mean, how much more does he expect from us to do? And we can do that in prayer. And in prayer, I can be in a relationship with others, even from different denominations or different religions. Praying for someone makes me love him. This is part of prayer, and I believe God answers prayer. So part of interfaith is prayer. And I believe this is how we will go on as we continue thinking of God. And he is the one who gave us this ability to have these relationships together.
For me, I'm going to read a verse from James' letter, chapter 1, 22. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. And therefore, it should be also for us, not only us talking here in terms of interfaith and what we would like to have, but actually do it and practice it in our daily lives, because this is what it's all about. Because if we're not able to practice it in our daily life and only say we would like that and not actually do it, then that's not then we're not able to go past that point, you know?
I'd like to preface with a small little thing that sometimes is a stumbling block for people of very strong personal faith. And I could relate it to the document that was published in Vatican II, Nostra Aetate, about opening up the Catholic Church to interfaith dialogue. And obviously, this 60 years ago, this is the 60th year, it would be very difficult to help people to say we should be opening up and having a nice conversation with Muslims and with Hindus and with Buddhists and with Jews and everybody else. And what's our faith? And that document is actually very strong because of that reason on the identity and uniqueness of Christ. So like Pastor Sally mentioned quite a few times, that we don't have to deny ourselves and our identity and our understanding in order to engage in mutual encounter with the other. And that even happens in a family, between husband and wife, between parents and children. Everybody is different, brother and sister. The text I had for you is a text from Romans chapter 5. And there it says that even though we were sinners, Christ died for us. Now, if you go to the biblical language, because you have to see this in the culture of Paul 2,000 years ago, the sinner was anathema, was the opposite, the worst thing you could imagine, away from God, alien to God. And Jesus died for us precisely when we were sinners, while we were still sinners. That text is in chapter 5, verse 6, 7, and 8. And the whole chapter of 5 of Romans is very interesting in that regard. And it's about a cultural word that you mentioned, hope and peace. And we need hope to reach and to do what's necessary, doers of the word, to reach the peace our societies need, the children need, the grandchildren need, and we're all called and invited to be involved. And I invite you to see the documents, because sometimes people are unsure. We have very, very rich documents, and we can follow up with that allow people to understand, like to read that document on fraternity, to read Nostra Aetate. They're usually only 1 or 2 pages, and they're brilliant introductions for us to be serene and confident to engage in dialogues with others. And it doesn't mean about renouncing our own faith at that time doing it. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And just a one on sin. I was speaking with somebody who specializes in etymology, and they were talking about how the word sin has its root in terms of archery, of you miss the mark. That would be the origin of where the concept, at least in English, of the word sin would come from. In chet, also in Hebrew, for the biblical term, chet is also meant to be a term linked to missing an aim. So trying is not the thing that's going to be getting you into trouble. it's the impure intention. So, you know, just putting yourself into an environment where there are people of other faiths, or exposing yourself, encountering the other, that's the first step. You know, if you go in with a good intention, I'm sure you'll make some cultural blunders or some awkwardnesses, or figure out the person doesn't speak a native language, even though you've been talking for 10 minutes. But, you know, at some point you'll break through.
Just to invite people, we're having a birthday party. You want to come? We'd like you to sing your song in Arabic or the language you have, or tell us a story, and to do something very simple, to celebrate together, to celebrate when the Muslims in your neighborhood in Europe are having Ramadan. Greet them. And there's a beautiful expression they use for Ramadan. It's the greeting for Ramadan, like we say Happy Christmas. They say, or Merry Christmas, they say Ramadan Kareem, a generous Ramadan. I'm also curious why your last name is Ramadan.
I was expecting that.
No, I didn't plan it in that sense, but it did occur to me when I saw your last name.
There's something special and funny in Nazareth. You have family names that sound more Muslim, but it's a Christian family. And then you have family names that are the other way around. So you have from both sides. So that's only in Nazareth, I think. No, but there are stories always behind these names, yeah, where they came from, traditions.
You always have Ramadan all year round.
Yes, exactly. Ramadan Kareem. I like that.
Well, on that note of generosity, and we have Ramadan in what, a week starting from now?
Our prayer, we need to pray that the people in leadership can cause more bloodshed or less bloodshed, but hopefully we pray that there will be a will to save life. And the holiness also of people praying will be respected. And that hopefully we pray for this because God can work miracles.
Amen. I think that's a wonderful note to end on. I want to thank everybody that was listening for the live event, and sorry for the few interruptions here and there, just something to do with the signal. This video is going to stay online afterwards. You can share it. We're also going to upload it to YouTube as well. And I highly encourage you to have a look at some of the posts that we made on Facebook, which have a little bit of a summary of each of the speakers that we have here today. Tells you a little bit more about their background in this story. So thank you very much.
Yeah.